I always thought nothing was more important than family, until the day my wife and daughter shattered that belief in a way I never saw coming. For 20 years, my marriage to Victoria, who is now 40, was built on trust, on the idea that love could overcome any obstacle. We had a daughter, Delilah, now 19 and just starting college, and for years I prided myself on our financial security. I'd worked hard, made smart investments, and built what many would call a comfortable small fortune. We never worried about unpaid bills, ran out of dinner money, or lived in fear of tomorrow's hardship. I believed that being responsible with money meant planning for the future, something I did with calculative precision, even though I always allowed for the occasional family indulgence, a luxury car here, a fancy vacation there. At the beginning, my wife had been the kind of person who loved simple gestures, a quiet dinner at a cozy restaurant, a walk in the park, never expecting lavish displays of wealth. I admired her humility, the fact that she never let my financial discipline seem like miserliness or coldness. I remember one night after a modest meal when Victoria softly said, "Nathan, I love the way you plan, the way you think about tomorrow. It's irresistible." I believed then that we were partners in every sense, plotting a future filled with stability and quiet joys. Our long-term plans revolved around preserving that financial prudence, ensuring Delilah never had to worry about a mortgage or student loans, that we all enjoyed life without excess. But life, as it often does, took a surprising twist. Gradually, Victoria began suggesting we live more in the moment. At first, it was small things. A lavish dinner out, a spontaneous idea of a European vacation filled with designer boutiques and luxury hotels. I brushed off these new suggestions, thinking all families needed a pinch of indulgence. Yet one evening, while passing by the kitchen, I overheard her in an intimate conversation with Delilah, discussing extravagant getaways abroad. The words hung in the air like an omen. I tried to ignore them, to believe it was just a temporary desire for fun. But deep down, something inside me shifted. When I gently broached the topic later that evening, I asked, "Victoria, I couldn't help but hear you and Delilah talking about Europe. Is that really something we're considering?" Her eyes flashed with a fire I wasn't used to seeing. "Nathan," she replied coolly, "we've worked our whole lives for this. You have the means, and frankly, we deserve to live a little now." Her words hit me like a cold gust of wind. Suddenly, the woman I trusted seemed different. I had always assumed that because I'd guarded my financial secrets, my investments, my net worth, she would remain uninterested in the money itself. But I was wrong. Victoria had once impressed me by never flaunting wealth. I still recall our first date at a small cafe, a hidden gem that was simple, quiet, and unassuming. When the bill came, she casually offered to split it with me, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I happily declined, convinced that nothing was hidden behind her modest smile. But over time, her interest began shifting. At first, it was a subtle change, a switch to a more expensive perfume here, a comment about designer clothes there. Soon, those comments morphed into demands for diamond earrings, designer handbags, and even trips that would rival the fantasy escapes of celebrity life. Our humble annual vacation turned into a debate over whether Florida was good enough or if we should be living the tropical dream of Bali, first class, and in a private villa. I tried to remain patient, to compromise for the sake of my wife's happiness. "I'm all for an occasional splurge, but remember, it took me years to accumulate this wealth," I reminded her during one tense dinner. "We built a life together through care and discipline." Yet Victoria's eyes darkened as she shot back, "That may be true, but money is meant to be enjoyed while we're alive. We can't keep living like misers." And then the unthinkable happened. I realized there was a line where her desire for luxury had morphed into something else, a hunger that wasn't satisfied by a simple Range Rover or a sleek BMW until an unexpected discovery turned my world upside down. One night, after weeks of simmering tension, I overheard a conversation that confirmed every worry I had begun to harbor. I stood by as Victoria talked animatedly with Delilah about trips, about designer outings, and about a lifestyle that seemed more suited to the Kardashians than to our humble existence. I tried to meet her eyes when I confronted her later that evening, my voice calm but resolute. "Victoria, I need to understand, are you seriously considering these extravagant expenses?" Her reaction was immediate and fiery. "Nathan, why would we not? You've made more money than anyone, and we're living below our means. Life is too short to save every dime, she snapped, as though I were the only one failing to see that my fortune was meant to be celebrated, not hoarded. I started noticing that perhaps this wasn't just Victoria anymore. Delilah, the daughter I had cherished, whose childhood I helped shape with laughter, science projects, and bedtime stories, began echoing her mother's sentiments. One phone call with Delilah left me reeling when she coldly insisted, "Mom says you just use saving as an excuse. We deserve more than this middle-class existence." I couldn't believe it. My own daughter, the girl I'd nurtured and sacrificed for, was now aligning herself with a life of glossy superficiality, with the allure of fast money and instant gratification. Desperate for the truth, I decided it was time to confront the source of this transformation. I sat down with Victoria one evening in our quiet living room, determined to understand the sudden shift. "Victoria, we need to talk about how things have been going lately. Our spending, your attitude toward money, everything," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. Her eyes narrowed. "What's wrong with living a little, Nathan? You built this wealth so we could enjoy our lives, not lock everything away like a miser." The conversation escalated quickly. I tried to remind her that every dollar in our account was hard-earned, the product of years of sacrifice, of calculated risk. Instead of empathy, I was met with biting sarcasm and accusations that I was the villain in our own family story. At that point, I began to understand that the line had been crossed long ago, the moment Victoria discovered just how much I really had. Somehow, she'd stumbled upon details of my investments, my true net worth, and with that knowledge, her taste changed irreversibly. It wasn't long before her requests grew bolder, her confidence in spending encouraged by visions of high-end living. I found myself reluctantly accommodating requests that escalated from moderate luxuries to near extravagant demands. It felt like trying to contain a wildfire with a garden hose. Soon I realized that the discussion wasn't just about trips or handbags anymore. It was about values and identity, about a betrayal deeper than any financial transaction I had ever managed. One evening, after days filled with tension, I finally decided that a heart-to-heart discussion was needed. "Victoria, we need to talk about this relentless spending," I said firmly. "We have a solid financial foundation because we've been disciplined, and I'm not willing to risk everything I've built for whims that never add real value." Her eyes flashed, and I heard the hurt mixed with anger in her reply. "Oh, so now you're the problem? You're so obsessed with the numbers that you forget I have needs too." The conversation spiraled, each of us defending our own interpretation of what money meant. Me as the careful provider, and her as someone who had grown tired of waiting for a future that never felt luxurious enough. Before I knew it, Delilah, my beloved daughter, chimed in. "Dad, you're the one who always talks about saving, but look around. You have millions. Why must we live like we're scrimping for pennies?" Her words, delivered in a tone that struck me with the force of betrayal, cut deeper than any financial loss. I had given everything to build a legacy, a secure home, an education for Delilah, and a life free from financial worry. Yet now those very efforts were twisted into a justification for reckless spending and a demand for an immediate, glamorous lifestyle. I tried to reach out to Delilah later that night over the phone, my voice trembling as I pleaded, "Sweetheart, is this really how you feel? Is it all about chasing fleeting moments of luxury?" A cold silence followed, then her clipped response. "Mom says you just don't spend enough. Your saving is just an excuse." Her single word, "excuse," reverberated in my soul, undermining every lesson I had worked so hard to instill. I explained slowly and painfully that every step I took with my money was to secure our future, so that even if life threw us curveballs, we'd always have something to fall back on. But the conversation only confirmed the widening rift between us, a gap created not by numbers on a page, but by values and hearts drifting apart. Days turned into a bleak series of confrontations and growing silence. At home, the warmth of our shared bond was replaced by cool indifference and transactions masquerading as interactions. Whenever I reminded them that our extravagant expenses were still only a small fraction of what I had built over the years, Victoria would scoff, and Delilah would roll her eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. that the core of our family was eroding beneath the pressure of materialism and greed. Then the final shock came on an ordinary evening when we were all seated on the couch, the television humming in the background. A strange notification sound emanated from Victoria's phone, a tone unlike any familiar alert, one that signaled something was off. I watched as she quickly shielded her phone from my view, her body tensing as if hiding a secret. "What was that?" I asked softly. "Nothing important," she replied dismissively. But that isn't how someone who used to share even the smallest details would behave. The unease in my gut grew, and later that night, after much internal struggle, I took a chance when she left her phone unattended. With shaking hands and a heavy heart, I unlocked it, and what I discovered paralyzed me. There, in plain sight on an exclusive dating app designed for wealthy men and glamorous women, was her profile. It wasn't Tinder or some casual hookup app. It was sleek, refined, a curated marketplace for those accustomed to luxury. Her profile picture was flawless, a polished shot that could easily have graced a high-fashion magazine cover. Her bio boasted about living a high-end life and seeking a man who could spoil a woman like she deserved. And crucially, there was no mention of a husband or a daughter. It felt as if she had deliberately erased our history, as if our life together was just a footnote she was willing to discard. Unable to dig any deeper into the barrage of flirtatious messages that confirmed her betrayal, I confronted her the very next time we were alone. "Why are you on a dating app?" I asked, my voice void of any softness. For a moment she stared at me, paralyzed by the confrontation, then stammered, I was only curious. I haven't met anyone." But curiosity was just a cover. As she desperately attempted to insist her innocence, I could see her true feelings. A yearning for a lifestyle far beyond what I was willing to provide. A desire to be seen as more than the husband and father I'd always tried to be. The confrontation ended in a storm of accusations and bitter silences. As I left that painful conversation, I couldn't shake the image of Delilah's indifference. The realization that my daughter, too, had begun to drift into the world of glittering ideals and extravagant dreams. In the days that followed, the divide in our family became ever more pronounced. Victoria and Delilah seemed to live in a parallel realm where money was not guarded but spent freely on brands, trips, and endless possessions. While I remained the reluctant guardian of our financial stability, determined to preserve every dollar of the wealth I had painstakingly built. One day, gathered with Delilah in her college dorm, I tried once more to bridge the gap. "Delilah, did you know your mother is on that dating app?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. Without a flicker of surprise or concern, she replied with casual indifference, "Yeah, can you really blame her? What's the point of being with a man who acts poor when you can have the life of a celebrity?" Her words, so dismissive and so laced with entitlement, hit me like a sledgehammer. How had the values I had spent years trying to instill been so easily dismissed? The realization tormented me as I drove back home, her voice echoing in my heart, confirming that the gap between us had grown to an irreparable chasm. As the pressure mounted, it became painfully clear that if our family was to survive, I would need to protect everything I had worked for. Desperation had led me to reach out to a trusted friend who urged me to consult a lawyer, a specialist renowned for helping men in high-net-worth situations. I met with a highly respected attorney, Ron Jeremy, and no, I'm not referring to any unsavory names. This is purely his given name. A man whose cold, calculated expertise helped me strategize for a divorce I never thought would come, yet now loomed on the horizon. I knew that if Victoria and Delilah intended to strip away what I'd built over 2 decades, then I had to act fast. That period that followed was one of careful, clandestine maneuvering. Overnight, I transformed from the doting husband to a man quietly orchestrating financial restructuring. With Ron's guidance, I began shifting assets, migrating funds into trusts, offshore accounts, and discrete investment structures that would be nearly impossible for anyone to trace back to me. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, executed with the precision of a general planning a war. I played the role of the forgiving husband perfectly, showering Victoria with just enough warmth, a couple of thoughtful gifts, dinners at upscale restaurants, to keep up appearances, while behind the scenes I safeguarded my future. In a moment of subtle provocation one evening, at a chic rooftop restaurant, Yes, one of her favorite haunts. I casually mentioned an investment I had been watching, hinting that it might yield millions if all went well. Her reaction, a fleeting moment of wide-eyed greed, confirmed that the allure of fortune had truly taken hold of her. Little did she know that investment was nothing more than a ruse, a fictitious promise designed to distract her long enough for me to complete my careful maneuvering. For nearly 2 long months, I watched as Victoria's obsession with immediate luxury grew, while I continued transferring funds until I was certain that the lion's share of what I'd worked tirelessly for was beyond her reach. Then, as fate would have it, the facade crumbled. One cool evening at home, as we lounged in front of a mindless reality TV show she adored, I casually informed her that the investment opportunity I had hyped had collapsed. Her reaction was immediate. Her expression soured, and I could sense that the shifting tide had finally caught up to her greed. It wasn't long before she served me with divorce papers. A silent, stinging document slid across the counter. I took them, looked them over briefly, and simply said, "If that's truly what you want, so be it." There was no drama, no desperate pleading. In reality, we had both let this spiral continue for far too long. The divorce proceedings were as brutal as I had feared. Victoria, having never prepared financially for a separation, ended up with only a fraction of what she had fantasized about. A neat sum that, in the grand scheme, was merely a token of her overblown dreams. Meanwhile, Delilah sided with her mother, insisting that our family deserved a lavish lifestyle, one that left me accused of being miserly, of withholding the luxury that should have been mine to provide. One of our last conversations, filled with biting words and accusations, still echoes in my mind. "You have millions, Dad, yet you treat us like we're living paycheck to paycheck," Delilah said flatly. Her disdain, mingled with a sense of betrayal, shattered a part of me that I thought had been unbreakable. I was left with a bitter taste of betrayal. The family I had built, a solid foundation of love and discipline, was disintegrating, replaced by a warped view of wealth and entitlement. Even as I attempted to nurture any semblance of a bond with Delilah, our interactions turned transactional, as if she was measuring her worth by the price tag on our possessions, rather than by the love and care we once shared. In a final act of emotional severance, I made the hardest decision of my life. I removed her from my will. It was a necessary, if painful, lesson. I couldn't continue rewarding behavior that devalued everything I stood for. I decided that every remaining dollar of my fortune would go to causes I believed in. A legacy not of spent wealth, but of meaningful impact. If you're following along and this unfolding drama touches a nerve, please consider subscribing to our channel and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the choices we make in the name of love, money, and security. Your engagement not only fuels our storytelling, but helps us reach more viewers who might be walking similar paths. After the divorce, Victoria's downward spiral was painful to witness. Despite having received a handsome settlement, a drop in the vast ocean of the fortune I'd protected, she couldn't sustain the luxurious lifestyle she craved. Soon the debts began piling up. Relationships came and went like fleeting trends. She chased after someone new with each passing month, always opting for that ephemeral glitter of new love, even as they crumbled under the weight of unrealistic expectations. Meanwhile, Delilah, who once had the promise of building a bright future, now struggled with the painful reality that her dream of luxury was built on a foundation of shattered principles. I heard whispers that she even had to part with her beloved BMW 3 Series, a symbol of the life she believed was her birthright. In the aftermath, as I attempted to reconcile with the painful loss of my family's former closeness, I found solace in unexpected places. I started working less for necessity and more for the satisfaction of purpose. I immersed myself in projects that brought meaning, and in that quiet reprieve, I discovered the simple joy of genuine companionship. 2 loyal German shepherds named Max and Luna. Max, the steady older one, and Luna, full of youthful exuberance, offered me a kind of unconditional love that no amount of money or fancy lifestyle ever could. Their wagging tails and earnest eyes reminded me daily that true happiness rests not on riches, but on the warmth of genuine connection. Yet even amidst that solace, the echoes of what had transpired at home haunted me. I often wonder if Delilah is seeking out relationships not for love, but as a financial safety net, an inheritance of glitz that replaces genuine affection. Each call, each text, fills me with conflicting emotions. Love for a daughter I once knew so well, and grief for the distance created by materialism and misguided choices. I now work with a measured determination. When asked what truly brings me joy, I say it's not the stacking of wealth or the fleeting thrill of luxury. It's the quiet peace I experience in the company of my dogs, on solitary walks in the park. Feeling the wind remind me that life goes on regardless of our financial battles. I've made my choices, however painful they may be, to protect everything I've built and to ensure that the legacy I leave behind is rooted in integrity rather than entitlement. So if you found this story as engrossing as it is heart-wrenching, please give us a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more stories that peel back the layers of life, love, and the true price of ambition. Looking back, every decision was made with care, even if the results were far from what I'd ever envisioned. Victoria chose a transient glamour over loyalty, and Delilah, entangled in a web of inherited contradictions, chose a path that ultimately drove a wedge between us. I remained steadfast, though scarred, committed to the principles that once bonded our family. In the quiet moments in my study, gazing at a portfolio carefully built over 2 decades and at the warm eyes of my faithful companions, I realized that sometimes the only lasting treasure is the truth we hold inside and the lessons we learn from betrayal. Now, as I move toward a future free of the shadows of yesterday, I hope someday the wounds will heal, and perhaps one day, even Delilah and I can rediscover something resembling genuine, unforced love. But until that morning comes, I must honor the lessons learned and remain resolute in protecting what truly matters. A legacy forged not by money, but by choices, character, and the enduring pursuit of a life lived on our own terms. Thank you for listening to this long, raw, and unfiltered account of a family unraveled by greed and misplaced priorities. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this story if it resonated with you. Your support means more than any fortune ever could. This is my story, a journey through love, betrayal, sacrifice, and the hard reality that not every fairy tale ends happily. Sometimes the cost of wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the parts of us we must sacrifice along the way.